Morning, Dave. Good to see you. All right, let's do this thing, fellas. Can we do it? Let's do it. Good morning. Hey, I want you to know, man, we were baling hay Monday night with the Ravens game Monday night. I didn't know if we'd have any guys show up, but we did. It was good. So, hey, we're going to have a good morning this morning, and I have a couple things I need to mention prior to jumping in. But I will tell you this morning, you're going to learn a couple Hebrew words, Henry. It's going to be terrific. First of all, I want to thank Stefan. Stefan helped facilitate a great workshop Saturday morning. Good morning, Joel. And it was a great time on apologetics. Yeah, it really was. It was terrific. I'm fully expecting we'll do it again at some point. He doesn't probably know that yet, but we will. It'll be great. And if you can come next time, it would just be great. So that's one thing. So Steph, thank you. Seriously, I appreciate your work and your time. It was just a great morning. Second of all, some guys have asked about, what's going on in North Carolina, that relief effort and how to help and that kind of thing. I found out this week, if you desire to not just give money, which is wonderful, and pray, which I hope we're all doing, if you actually wanted to go down and give a little time, few days, a week, or 5 days, whatever, if you go to the website for Samaritan's Purse, just all SamaritansPurse.org, Franklin Graham's organization, they do a phenomenal job in places like this, literally all over the country. You can go there and sign up through their website. If that's something that you feel like, hey, I'd like to go down, maybe take my family or whatever, that's an option for you to do. So that's something for you can consider. All right? Sound good? Good. Hey, this morning, I'm really looking forward to what we're going to do. And I want to thank you guys for, it's really funny when I tell people what we're doing here, that, hey, we're doing 10 weeks, on the conundrum of pain and suffering. It usually is quiet after that. Because they're like, you're doing what? Like, does anybody come? Is this... What's that? Pain and suffering is 10 weeks. It's 10 weeks of pain and suffering. Thank you, Eric. That's what we need. Guys like Eric here. And it's just, I just want to thank you guys because I know that, I hope when this time is over that, in fact, each week that there is a sense of hope in this too. The reason we're doing this though is because this is life. It is what we deal with. And I know that. And a lot of times if we don't anticipate and think about things, then when those things come, a lot of times we don't know what to do. And so we want to do everything we can to just help us be more prepared for the realities of life and know how to encourage each other more. So today we're going to take another journey, a step in, but let me do this as always. I want to just pause for a moment. And is there anything that you guys would like to review? Maybe there's a question you'd like to ask that you didn't get a chance to, that I won't know the answer to, but you can ask it anyway. Is there anything that's kind of right there that you'd like to throw out, revisit, deal with, address, or anything like that? No pressure, but I want to allow that opportunity. And if not, we'll carry on, but don't be afraid or whatever. Yes, Josh, thank you. Yes.
That was profound in a lot of ways.
Josh was just saying, if you didn't hear last week when we got into smaller groups and talked about maybe something in your life that made you feel like, hey, I just can't go on, like I've hit a wall, I'm ready to be done with this thing in terms of my faith, whatever. And we got into groups and shared about that. He said how significant that was. Do you know what kind of made it so significant, or?
Yeah.
Wow. Huh.
So it was surreal.
Wow. You literally went to a time, a place, you could almost feel it in your spirit what you were fighting and resisting. Wow. That's amazing. One of the things that I want to show, I think I remember this, one of the Dave campaign, you can help me with this, but there was a study, 275 men over 75 years, the longest relational longitudinal study ever done. And the outcome was, in terms of people's health, the most significant thing, which is going to be a no-brainer, was relationships. It's just relationships. And it's amazing how many people don't have very many of them. And so in some ways, this is why what we're doing here is kind of abnormal, meaning you're not finding this going on in Baltimore all over the place. Once a week, let alone twice. It's kind of crazy to me even, really. But it's saying something, that we need this, we want this. You know, this solo idea of isolation and going through stuff just doesn't work. And this notion of being a man, some of you may know John Eldredge. They just have you guys might want to even look this up. They just put on called Wild at Heart. It's on YouTube now, but the book Wild at Heart, some of you have read it. I think it's sold like 7 million copies worldwide now. It's translated in other languages and all kinds of stuff. But one day he interestingly stumbled on this thing called the heart. We talked about that, and it's crazy. It was affirming, encouraging to me because we weren't in cahoots. I didn't read his book and then think about the heart. You know, you read the scriptures 880 times. But one of the things that they've done is taken the stories of some men and done a phenomenal job documenting some of the things that happened in the lives of these men from where they were to where they are now. And it deals with so many different areas of their life, from loneliness, busted up marriages, getting healed in many ways in these broken areas. But one of the reoccurring themes is isolation to relationship. And I just want to underscore this again, that, you know, I can't make you do this, but I hope you're taking advantage of some of the brothers around the table and building these friendships. And, you know, I know this is new news to you guys, but you guys can actually be together outside of these times if you wanted to. You can actually hang out at other times if you wanted to. And I hope you will, because life is we need each other. So today we're going to start a 2-week journey on some thoughts that I need to give full credit to. Mati, I'm sorry.
So, the Tim quote, what stuck with me was the Tim Keller quote, that though God might seem absent, that doesn't mean he is.
Yeah.
It got me wondering whether Keller, how he died, if he died triumphantly, like poor Pastor Corey this week.
Yeah.
They shared about how his mother entered
Yeah.
very triumphantly. I just wondered if God seemed absent for him in those.
You know, I don't know, but I can say from everything that I've heard and sensed, you know, that Keller was very honest about, you know, his journey, and there's fear and deep grief and sadness of leaving those you love. But, you know, he's written on a lot of stuff. It's interesting when you're a very well-known, which he never aspired to be, but a very well-known pastor in the public eye, you've written a number of books, and then all of a sudden you're looking the stuff that you wrote about in the face, and you're having to deal with it in front of the public eye. Now it's like, okay, at some point I think we all have a do I really believe this moment. You know, is this, I know I said it's true, but like, it's kind of like you're on the bungee cord and you've watched 100 people jump and you know it'll hold you until you got to jump. And you're thinking like, okay, I know it's held 100 people. I've sat here, watched it, but now I'm jumping. And my only question is what? Is it going to hold for the 101st time? And you won't know until you jump. And so, maybe not a great illustration, but I think my sense was he was a brother that not only lived in faith, but truly did die in faith, so to speak, you know? And it's a magnificent thing, but it's also hard. It's a conundrum. Yeah. So I did a men's weekend down in Virginia Beach last April. At the end of the weekend, one of the guys that was facilitating it was just sharing a few books that had impacted him, and I like books, and he mentioned one called The Mysteries of the Messiah. Bill, you'll like this, by a guy named Rabbi Jason Sobel, S-O-B-E-L. So I just got it. I didn't know when I'd read it, but I got it. So I started reading some stuff over the summer, and I thought, oh my gosh, I read this chapter on the desert, and I thought, my goodness, this is really good. And so I said, I got to bring this to the fellows because this really fits in to what we're doing in this session. So this week, we're going to do some introductory thoughts, talk about some things. Next week, we're going to talk about some of the things that happen when you're in the desert, all right? But so let's just enter in. I'm going to do my best. I tried to take some stuff that was impacting to me and whittle it down And I thought, oh man, if I can somehow talk to you guys about this for a little bit without totally confusing everyone, that's going to be a miracle for the day. You'll have experienced your miracle. And then, but we'll have a good time with this. So you guys are patient. It'll be fun. And then we're going to have some time debriefing around the tables and then coming back and teaching each other a little bit. So I hope it'll be fun. We had a good time Monday night, so it'll be great. So let me just do this. When you hear me say the word desert, all right, like desert, like what comes to mind? Like sand. All right, Ken, you go to the top of the class. Sand. Love that. That's like saying beach, sand, desert, sand. Yes, sand. Barren. Okay, we have dry. Barren. What's that? Hot and nasty. What's that? Somebody said. What did somebody else say? Cake. I still haven't heard a word. Okay, thank you. Thank you, Kenny. I heard that. I appreciate that. Yes.
I think about living without.
Living without. All right, I'm just going to put without. Without.
Testing.
Excuse me?
Testing.
Fascinating.
Testing.
Oh, testing. Is it fascinating as well? Testing. What's so testing about it, Dave?
It's hard living, and I mean, I just think all the biblical stories of the Bible, God sends His people into the desert to test them.
Wow.
God sends Jesus into the desert to test them.
Yeah, how about that? You guys maybe hadn't thought about that, but I don't know if any of you have had a chance to go to Israel. I have, and I'm just telling you, it doesn't take long being there before you realize, Monty, you've been there. There's a whole lot of desert around here. There's a whole lot of dryness around here. And if you ever get the chance to go to En-Gedi, it's like, and you think these guys go out in the wilderness, like to be with God or to go someplace, you see caves and you think of David hiding, from Saul, and you get a sense of like, man, there's no way. I know it sounds crazy, but when you think of some, looking for Osama bin Laden, and that was in Afghanistan, but I mean here, you can see why guys are hard to find. Like it is barren out there kind of place. And it's a really, really, really unique encounter. You think about this, Israel, the majority of the 5 books of the Torah, Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, Deuteronomy, all took place in the desert. It's kind of intriguing. So somebody else had their hand raised too. Yeah.
I said waterless.
Waterless.
No water,
Yeah.
which leads to death.
Or if you do find water, it's kind of, it creates, you have to go deep for it. It creates an oasis kind of place, and people come around for those kind of things. How come nobody said anything positive?
One thing that a lot of y'all don't know, it's cold as hell at night.
It's cold. In fact, this is interesting. Elijah said it's not just cold, it's an oxymoron. It's cold as hell at night. It's cold at night. It's really interesting. As hot as it is in the day, it's exactly opposite at night, which is kind of interesting. It's beautiful. Wow. Yes. And it's interesting, I don't know about you, but on our TV, our Apple TV, if you don't keep watching the show for a while, like all these beautiful pictures come on. And I feel like, man, I'll just sit here and watch this. That's better than the show I'm watching. And sometimes you'll get pictures of the desert, and it really is gorgeous. It's like, I don't know that I want to be there right now, but if I can just look at it, it's amazing. Gregory?
There actually is life there. So
Yeah.
reptiles and other animals. So there's a you have to look for it. It's not as easy to find.
That's really interesting. There is life there. Interesting. Things have adapted. Mirages. Ooh. Yes. Things are not always as they seem. That's really good. This,
Night sky is spectacular.
nice sky.
The night sky is spectacular.
Wow. Yeah, the sky, you can just see the stars. It's like you have a view of things. You can start feeling pretty small really quickly. Eric, the Beckers, the O'Briens, and the Goodmans had a chance to go to Israel together. And one of the things that we got to do one night was go stay with some Bedouin shepherds. Was that what they were? Yeah. And these guys, like, they're some rustic dudes, man. Like these guys, I mean, like they literally have this capacity to transport these massive tents that they make. You get a sense of Israel moving the tabernacle around back in the wilderness at times, and they put, they put these things up, and there's camels out there and crazy stuff, and then night sky, you're out in the middle of flipping no place, and these guys, it's like going in somebody's backyard. Next day they roll it up, put it where they need to go to the next place and set it up again. It was like they learned to do life well in the desert. Eric, did you say anything else about that?
Yeah, and those tents are so big, they put fires inside the tent to keep you warm at night.
Yeah, I mean, they got like...
Guys that tend the fire all the time through the night.
In fact, one of the guys, Betsy, and my wife and Eric's wife, Jenny, were over in the corner. Some big Bedouin guy keeping the fire kept looking at them all night. They were a little afraid, to say the least, but it was all right. I was asleep. I said, "You guys all right? Everything good?" Yeah, we're good. We're good. Here's what I want to put up a little quote here. We're going to do a few slides because I said spiritually, I just want to think about this. So think about this. Spiritually, being in the desert a lot of times speaks of a time of wandering. Maybe a time of dryness, of waiting. That doesn't mean it's bad, but it is a time of waiting. It can be, like you guys said, a time of testing. Sometimes feeling isolated. We'll get more into this morning, but I want to say a little bit more that isn't up there, but times of pain, loss, and suffering, I think, can easily make us feel like a spiritual desert. But I also want to say this, that you guys said some things that are crazy. We don't often see it right away, but it can at the same time be a place of beauty. And I will say what Joel said, that sometimes it's not always as it appears. It is as it appears, but that's not all it is. And hopefully some of this stuff we'll see this morning in hindsight can encourage us as we go forward learning from Israel, because it doesn't take long before, if you look at Israel's history, to see how much development, spiritual development, and encounters with God literally happened there. And I don't know all that makes it. I think it's a place that could be also of undistraction. But you think about even not only Israel's history, but as Dave said, that Jesus instantly, after he's baptized by John, goes where? Into the wilderness. And so I want us to think about this. So let me do this. This Hebrew word, well, here we go. You guys strap it on. Here we go. The Hebrew word for desert or wilderness, say with me, is midbar. I'm going to leave this up there, okay? If you guys want to, midbar. The root for midbar is is davar, okay? Say, how do you know this, Goody? Rabbi Jason Sobel. That's how I know this. And so the root for midbar is davar, which means word. That's interesting, isn't it? Word. It's related to another word, middaber, which means to speak. Word or to speak. This is tied to the desert and wilderness, equals to speak or word. The desert and wilderness is a place, think about this, where God speaks. It's not often a place we think he would, but Jesus would often go to lonely places. Going out in the wilderness, you think of other things that happened. Think about this a minute. Where did the 10 Commandments delivered? And so this is, I just want to just notch that sometimes when maybe we're in that place and we feel alone, man, and it feels dry, maybe it feels barren, and that's true, but could it also be a place where God speaks and you have an encounter that may not happen in any other place? Because I would believe this, if you're out here very long, your antennas are up. Like you're looking for some stuff, for safety, for awareness, whatever it might be. The desert is where obviously Moses led the Israelites, and then he rescued them from bondage in Egypt. But let's do this. If you have your Bibles, let's look at Exodus 14 for a minute. I just want to say this before we learn a few more words. You guys still with me so far? Good. Are you confused yet? Okay, if you are, just pretend you're not. It'll make me feel much better. So in Exodus chapter 14, as you guys know the story, They're taken out of Egypt, right? They go through the Red Sea, and when they get to the other side, they're really excited, aren't they? They're so happy. They're jumping up and down when they see that they're being tailed by Pharaoh and his guys, right? The answer to that would be no. So let's read sort of what came of this. It's verse 5 of chapter 14, just real quick, I want to highlight a couple things. When the king of Egypt was told that the people had fled, Pharaoh and his officials changed their minds about them and said, "What have we done? We've let the Israelites go and have lost their services." So he had his chariots made ready and took his army with him. So they go and they're following Israel. Verse 10, as Pharaoh approached, the Israelites looked up. And we'll talk about how many of them there are in a minute. And there were the Egyptians marching after them. They were terrified and cried out to the Lord. Then they said to Moses, do you ever think how lonely Moses was sometimes this is crazy. They said to Moses, was it because there were no graves in Egypt that you brought us to the what? To do what? Say, hey, look, we were someplace, we could have died there. They had graves there. So wasn't that a good enough place to die? Why'd you bring us out here in the desert to die? So they're making this assumption, right? That they were released from Egypt to just simply go to another place to die. What have you done to us by bringing us out of Egypt? Didn't we say to you in Egypt, leave us alone, let us serve the Egyptians? It would have been better for us to serve the Egyptians than to die in the where? Desert. Moses answered the people, do not be afraid. Stand firm and you will see the deliverance that the Lord will bring you today. The Egyptians you see today, you will never see again. They're right there, Moses. I don't know how far they were, but that's trouble. But the Lord will fight for you. You need only to be still. Then the Lord said to Moses, why are you crying out to me? Tell the Israelites to move on. And all of a sudden, God puts a cloud in front of them, behind them to protect them. And what's he put in front of them? Fire to lead them by day, right? This is a crazy scene. This is so good. All right, let me just go on here. So think about this. Israel, how many years were they in Egypt? 400. In 400 years, generations have died off. In 400 years, whose gods do you think they become very familiar with? The Egyptian gods. In fact, it doesn't take them long, I don't know exactly how long, very long, before they get on the other side of the Red Sea in the desert. Moses has left them to go up to Mount to get to Sinai to get the 10 Commandments. He doesn't come back quick enough. And what do they decide to do with Aaron? We're going to build a golden calf. Where do you think they learned about the golden calf? In Egypt. Fertility god, exactly right. They're doing what they've learned, right? Somehow, they've just gotten through the Red Sea. Think about this. They have watched the Egyptians get obliterated, but now they go into the desert and somehow are thinking we need to be rescued by something else other than who already rescued us through the Red Sea, and now we're going to build that and worship that. Don't think we couldn't do this. I'm just saying, one of the things that's happening in the desert is that Israel needs to be re-educated, if you will, again. And the desert was a place where this process could occur. They are learning again who they are and whose it is that they belong to. The desert has a place of reorienting us. All right? Now, this is where it became really fascinating to me. This might seem like, wow, I never would have seen that. And that's exactly right, me either. And this is where I just want to put in a little plug. Anytime you can learn from people who maybe have a historical, linguistic, geographical awareness that's beyond yours than the letters on the page, take advantage of it. Because people see things we don't see, and the depth in this stuff is stuff that others would have known when they first read it. We don't see things. Like even in the Gospels. When I say Pharisee, you go like, oh, who's that? Like they were religious leaders, teachers, I guess, religious guys. People in the first century, when they met a Pharisee, it was a totally different experience. If you were first century Hebrew or Gentile even, and I said that word, you have a whole lot more than what I just said, some religious teacher banging up in your mind. It's a different perspective. But get this is so great. Egypt, the Hebrew word for Egypt is this word right here, Mitzrayim. It comes from the root Tazar. Do you see that T-Z-A-R right in the middle of that M word up there for Egypt? Do you see it? It's M-I-T-Z-A-R. That word, interesting, the word for Egypt in Hebrew means a tight or a constricted place, which Egypt was for Israel. It was a very constrained place for them. It was a place of confinement. It was a tight place. You can see it was kind of a womb of sorts that God birthed the nation when they went in. How many people were there? How many? 70. I gave you the answer right there. This is an open book test, fellas, right here. 70. When they left, they were a nation of millions. God was birthing a nation, Genesis 22:17, through whom, what was He going to do? The Savior of the world was going to come through this nation. This story is magnificent what's going on here. He's birthing a people. You know, when we read that God fed Israel in the wilderness with what? Quail and what? Manna. How long? 40. How long? 40 years. You think, oh, that's no big deal. You guys, this literally, I saw an illustration of this once. I wish I'd have studied. It could have been reminded of this again. It was like cargo loads of on a train of food every day. You think what it's like to feed a couple million people every day. And it's just every day. You don't get more except on the day for Sabbath. You get 2 days worth, but every day, this is like train loads of this stuff every day God's bringing. We just don't think about this. We go down to a soup kitchen and feed a couple hundred people on Thanksgiving, and we think, holy mackerel, man, that was like, whoa. And it is. Millions. Coming out of this nation. All right. So Egypt in Hebrew means what? Constricted place, or like a womb-like reality. All right, this is so good. Israel then spends, get this, 40 years wandering in the desert. Now, this is something I did not know. In Hebrew, numbers also have corresponding letters. Who knew that? Not me. This is where this gets really cool. Israel spends 40 years wandering in the desert. 40 is the number of weeks of a full-term pregnancy. What does Egypt mean? A constrained or tight place, womb-like. And so in Hebrew, 40 is represented by the letter Mem, M-E-M. Now here's the deal. These letters have shapes. I looked up literally what Mem looks like. You know what it looks like? It looks like a womb. And I even looked up a womb this week, and it looks like, this is what that letter looks like. It looks like a womb. Like if this is a woman's womb, you'd have some fallopian tubes going off. I don't want to draw that and distract you guys. You know, I've taken you guys somewhere you don't need to go. Some of you guys go, I love Iron Man in the morning. It's a wonderful place. I'm just saying, think about this. Israel, the name for Egypt in Hebrew means a tight or constrained place. Israel is birthed in Egypt from 70 people to millions. What do they need to do to get to freedom? They need to leave where? They need to leave constrainment to be liberated. 40 is the letter Mem with the shape of a womb. Are we together so far? All right, this is so cool. Get this, 400 years through pain, God then bursts literally this small nation physically into one that's as numerous as the stars of the sky. This word, Mem, also not only means womb, but it also has reference to water. What did Israel have to go through to get to the promised land? The Red Sea. It's crazy. 40 years in the wilderness, bringing a people through something and birthing them into a whole new people. Through the desert. He rebirths them by liberating, you could say, out of the constricted womb-like place of Egypt through water and rebirths them spiritually through 40 years in the wilderness to a new life in the promised land. You think about what God does to a human life before we really knew the Lord and being constrained. And that God, through His Spirit, takes us through. In fact, Jesus said, Nicodemus chapter 3, you must be what? Born again. And Nicodemus, well, how do you go back? Be right there, John. Into your mother's womb to be born again. And Jesus says, how do you not know this? This is a reference, like Nicodemus, Jesus is referring to some of these realities are like hyperlinks that he would have understood. We don't understand unless we do the work. I didn't either. John?
It's baptism. It's rebirth through immersion in water.
Yeah, all of these things are hyperlinks to, John was saying baptism, it's like a water bath, symbolic of a birthing that occurs. Something old goes away, something new is regenerated into. Yes, unfortunately, a lot of people that were wandering around for 40 years never experienced the true liberation that they had. How many people in the world resist the very liberation that God gives in the world and continues to fight His liberating Spirit and never experience what God would give them? It didn't take long, did it? They're more comfortable in Egypt, even though they're not in Egypt. They're wandering around in a desert toward the promised land with their minds and hearts still in Egypt. Here's the crazy thing. It didn't need to take 40 years to get to the promised land. This was a much shorter journey, fellas. We're talking months, not years. And we wander around because of what we fight, what we don't see. And even when they send Joshua and Caleb into the promised land, they bring back some beautiful things from the promised land. They bring it back. The nation doesn't go, oh, God told us the truth. They still don't believe. And how many people from that nation that wandered got to go into the promised land? Very few. Joshua, Caleb, some of the generations before, but the original, they didn't make it. And so what I'm saying to us is, I just want to say this, that as much as there are desert times, and I want to encourage us in this, and sometimes maybe even endless setbacks and times of barrenness and fear and uncertainty that all of us have been through or will, or maybe are even in it right now. I just want to say two things that we learned from this, and we're going to learn more next week. But that one, God can make a way forward when there seems to be no way. Do you believe that? I mean, that sounds like a preachy bumper sticker. I don't mean that. I'm saying when I look at Israel, when there seemed to be no way, they get out of Egypt, and what's the first thing they're looking at? The what? The Red Sea, right? We're like, that's an obstacle. And they're like, well, why'd you bring us out here to die? We could have just died there. There's no way we're getting across this Red Sea. And Moses said, look, God has said, tell Israel, the Lord will fight for you today. You need only to be still. It's like, don't start bailing, just stay right here. I'm telling you, you're my people. It was my decision to bless the world through you, not your decision. Your decision is to trust me, because I'm going to do what I'm going to do. I just want to encourage us that God sees, in those times that you just can't even imagine a way forward, God sees you, and you are not forgotten. I want to just offer that. Here's the second thing. God can birth new things in us from the things that we are willing to endure. That God can birth and will birth new things through us, through the things that we would dare to endure. And it's those who endured well that is just profoundly powerful. I'm going to share one thing a guy shared Monday night that I thought was just genius when we get back together again. But I want to just encourage you with these things. And so what I want to do, I want to put up some questions. Let me just stop here, though. Is this clear? Anything you want clarified? Makes sense? Comments? Yeah, Ryan.
How does Mem relate to the desert and Exodus? Just that letter.
Yeah, basically, they were wandering in the desert for 40 years. 40 is the letter in Hebrew of Mem. It correlates with Mem. And 40 also is the period of gestation for a child in the womb at the same time, right?
Connected via the number then.
What's that?
It's connected via the number.
Correct, connected via the number. And mem also, its shape is the shape of the womb, and it also refers to water. This is really interesting, this whole birthing process. You know, obviously a woman's water breaks. You know, some of you, oh, but I remember that. That was not good. And all these things, but that Israel's going from a constrained place, being birthed through the water, the Red Sea, going into a place for 40 years where God's going to shape them. Make sense? Yeah. Yeah, Edwin?
Also, just like they went through the Red Sea, they had to cross Jordan as well.
Yes. A little later, we go through the Jordan. That was a little different journey, but nonetheless, another water experience. There's a lot of birthing through water. And what I'm trying to just encourage us is to sit with us for a little bit. And so I want to throw up a couple questions, and then you guys can stay as a whole table. If you want to break down into smaller groups to share whatever, but particularly questions 2 and 3, but however much of this you want to get into, all right? And then I'll call us back in 25 minutes or so. But really enjoy this time together, all right, with some of these concepts. And next week, we're going to talk about some of the things that we can learn that actually occur even more so in the wilderness, all right? So enjoy this time together. All right, gentlemen, let's see what we can do here. All righty. Hey, I appreciate the banter and the dialogue. It's so good. And we're going to stay on this some more next week, and we'll talk a whole lot more next week just about some things that we can, what the desert creates, or those moments in our life or seasons, however you would interpret them, what they create space for us to do and learn. But I would love to just take a few minutes. Again, this could go no place or a lot of places. This is your time and our time together. But I would love to just maybe hear what maybe have you learned or are learning as you consider maybe a season in your life. Would you authenticate some of the stuff we've said that God does? Can you attest to some of the things He does in places that have been hard, desert-like? Maybe there have been times. Maybe you've realized it was a mirage and that, yeah, it was this, but it was also this. Anybody. We're a group of guys here. Love to just kind of hear how we can testify to God and His great. Yeah, Josh, real loud, because you're in the back.
One of the things that came up was, I don't know if I would call it the desert.
Yep.
I'm in it. Like, am I aware enough to know this is the desert? And then did the Israelites know the good that was to come?
Yeah.
Like, they knew the promise is, and then it relates back to a woman in pregnancy, when you watch them pregnant, there's excitement, there's joy, and as the pregnancy goes on, there's dread and exhaustion, they're just worn out. And then the baby comes, there's excitement and joy again. So it's this process of relating it back to that.
Yeah.
Visually seeing that.
Yeah, well, I'm sure it's all of that. That's the beauty of life. I think one of the things we're learning as we live life, it's way more of an art than a science. We just want it to all, we want it to all be figured out. We want a timeline. We want to it just doesn't work that way. And this is why God's encountered in the moments, the ups and downs. It's funny, you watch some women, go through what they do to birth a child. Jesus even talked about this. And it's like, okay, I'm never doing that again. And then you have a kid, and it's like, we need to have 3. It's like, I thought you were never doing that again. Yeah, the joy overweighs the pain kind of a thing, and it's really interesting. A guy Monday night said this. He goes, and this is a guy this guy's a little bit, he's awesome. Like, he literally is a professional mountaineer, a guy named Nick Chinsky. And he ran some distance races literally in the desert, to which we all looked and said, why? But he said, for me, he goes, I feel like all of life is a desert. And the promised land is coming. He goes, now that doesn't mean it's all bad. But he goes, I feel like we're in the desert. It's just we're moving towards something. It's not like I have a moment in my life where it's kind of really intense. And then he goes, in one sense, if I see the whole thing, there is this rebirthing process every day for me of what God's doing in my life, moving me towards that place where one day, obviously, He will be, and we will be, and all things will be as they should be. But I think the real challenge for us is that have we learned God's faithfulness along the way? Like we were even saying, Chow, we were just saying about, God fed Israel for how long? 40 years. And did He put stuff in a refrigerator, or was it DoorDash? We get the DoorDash thing going. Kinda. It's the first DoorDash. It's right from heaven. But just one day at a time, And so, one day at a time, I was like, yeah, I know God did it for a month, but the question is, will He do it again today? And what allows me to be certain that God will do it today is that He's done it for 30 days already. Like, here's the point. It's not just that He's done it, but it's His character, that He is actually faithful. He's actually faithful. And I'm telling you, God did not allow Israel to get away from having to know that He is faithful in that desert. They were going to die if they didn't depend on Him. Literally weren't going to make it. And when they took things into their own hands is when we get chaos again. We go back, And I'm just trying to say, I don't know what the desert, Josh, is what you're saying. It may look like, feel like different things. I'm just saying we go through things in life where we question, we wonder, it can feel dry. I mean, have any of you ever had a dry time in your journey with God? You just feel like, Lord, if this is a feeling thing, like, I ain't feeling it, But you stay the course, and it's because of who He is, and He's there, and it's easy to think He's gone somewhere, There are days, I've said this a million times to guys, where I don't feel married. But there's a woman walking around in my house. And she would go, there's a man walking around in my house. And, there's a point where it's like, we are this. And when you lean into the reality of what is, feelings, they stay and they move.
The Tim Keller quote.
Yeah, I think so. That's a really well stated, Monty. Do you remember that off the top of your head? Do you need me to look it up? Can you say it again?
Oh boy.
Well, if not, I'll try to help you out.
Help me out.
Well, go ahead and try.
Even though it seems like He is not present,
Yeah.
doesn't mean that He's absent.
That's exactly what it is. Though God may seem absent, it doesn't mean that He is. Yeah. And I think Israel would have said, God's absent out here. He wasn't absent when He parted the Red Sea, but He is now. We got no water. Gets water. Well, He left because we're hungry. Well, take care of that. Just one thing to the next. Moses has left us. He's not coming back. And so, I want to read you one thing before we leave. But any other thoughts? This is great. Yeah, Patrick.
Yeah, we were talking a lot at the table about distractions, right?
Distractions?
Distractions.
Yeah.
All along that path. And like I was saying, there's that one famous saying from Winston Churchill: "You'll never reach your destination if you stop and throw stones at every dog that barks."
Wow.
It's the same thing. Like when their focus came back to God, they made progress. The Israelites,
Yeah.
the desert, where they got stuck in the sand, if you will, is when they tried to go their own ways of trying to figure things out.
Winston Churchill, you'll never meet your destiny if you stop and throw stones at every dog that barks. How about that quote? It's interesting because this is what I appreciate about the Scriptures. Do you ever read the Scriptures and you say, how could they have done that? Like, do you ever think just how you could even say that? Like, what do you mean, how could they have done that? The question is, I could have done that. Like, we weren't there. We weren't them. We didn't go through all they went through. I know 100% how they did that. I mean, like, you guys, I'm telling you, the Lord, I could tell you right now, honestly, if you said, Goody, tell me the top 10 times where God showed up, where you thought He wasn't going to show up, and you thought you were on your own, and you didn't know how you were going to get through. I could tell you 10 things. It would take me no time, and I'm telling you, there are still times I wonder, hey, God, will you show up this time? And honestly, if I'm honest with you guys, I'm ashamed of that. I know I'm forgiven, but like, I'm like, really? That's still in me at some level? And yet, I also know that God is faithful. And we're a mess, aren't we, a little bit, at some level? Like, I'm here every week, too, because I need the Lord. Like, I do. I know it. And I don't know how you get through stuff without knowing the Lord, honestly. I don't think some people do very well. Dave?
I'm comforted by seeing how God meets them in the complaining.
Yeah.
And like, there's irony in the complaint because like they left Israel with hundreds of thousands of livestock.
Yeah.
2 weeks they're complaining about not having food. It's like, it's me. But God still feeds them.
Yeah.
You know, they complain about water. Well, if they just walked another day, they came to one of the biggest oases in the desert. But God's like, well, you've complained enough. I'm going to meet you now instead of making you wait another day. So I'm comforted by that.
Yeah.
It's like, I would have just looked at it and gone, eat your livestock.
Yeah.
Wait a day.
The long suffering of God, right? And the patience of God to reorient them to what they needed to learn is so beautiful. So beautiful. Dave?
Yeah, also too, like where Jesus says, whoever wants to be my disciple must deny themselves and take up their cross daily. I think often it's like, hey, if we just make this one decision, we don't need to keep doing it daily. Like daily. Like that hits me daily.
That's great. Every day.
You said it right. Who's the most important person to win to Jesus is me.
Yourself, every day.
I don't know if it's Chuck Reinholm.
Yep, Chuck said it. Yep, every day.
Every day.
Well stated. Well stated. Ken?
When you read the story of Egypt, the plagues, the Red Sea, the water, the manna, the birds, and you say, hey, you know, what does it take to convince them? But we're no different. We go through the same thing, like you said, almost on a daily basis. We don't have that 100% confidence to say, where's God?
Somebody said something the other day, I'm not going to get this right, but they said, you know, God gave Egypt 10 plagues to get Israel out of Egypt, but took them Israel into the desert to get Egypt out of them. In some ways, you know, so think about this. There's 10 plagues to get Israel out of Egypt, but God takes them to the desert to get Egypt out of Israel and to reorient them to who they were and what they were as a people. And I just want to encourage us to just dare to trust that God can make a way forward when there seems to be no way. And that He can birth new things in us from things that we dare endure. And don't worry about loving God next month. How about today? Let's just hang in there today and experience the mercies of God. Steve?
So maybe part of this conversation this morning is making me realize, like, Israel's wilderness experience was for a purpose.
Yes.
There's a couple million people who were slaves for 400 years, and they don't know how to be a nation. They don't even know that they're a nation.
Exactly.
They've forgotten their identity.
Completely.
God's chosen people. And you don't build a nation in a week. Like we keep saying, like, oh, if they hadn't sinned, if they hadn't done this, they hadn't done that. Like, it's amazing. It only took 40 years to get them to the place where they were ready to enter the promised land. And so I wonder, too, in my wilderness experiences, like, do I try to bring it all back to me. What's God doing for me? What's God doing in my life? God's got a plan going on. And maybe I experience the wilderness so that I'll be a better part of building His kingdom.
Yes.
Maybe it's not all navel gazing. God, why am I suffering? Why are you teaching me? Like, maybe God needs patient people to build the kingdom. Maybe He needs people with endurance. Maybe. So, like, often I think the wilderness experience isn't always just speaking to me personally, but to God's larger plan and how I fit into it.
I love it. I think you could say in some ways, you know, let's go ahead, Monty. Yeah.
To extend that metaphor even further that Steve just shared, Mark at our table makes the point that those who remained in the wilderness and chose not to go into Canaan because they were afraid and whatever. So it was an individual choice. And it's amazing to this day, people choose to remain in the wilderness.
Yeah.
Instead of embracing the good news of Jesus Christ. So there's really perfect parallels on that whole.
So you can think about this today. I don't know, even our scene right now, in our country. I mean, there's obviously a lot churning, craziness going on. There's 112 wars or conflicts going on in the world right now. A number of them in Asia, some of them are tribal, Africa, different kinds of places. But there's conflicts all over. We don't even think about it as we're sitting here right today. There's sex trafficking going on. It's craziness. There's stuff that you think people dying of, literally, they have no food. They're going to die today because they don't have anything to eat. In a world, there's plenty of food to go around. There's systems, oppressive governments that won't allow aid to get through. I mean, we got stuff going on. We got tensions going on and people throwing mud and slinging stuff about North Carolina, help didn't get there fast enough, this, that, and the other. So Steve, we can like, what? Or we can say, wait a minute, we're God's people. You can say this is kind of like desert-like right now. And we could also list a bunch of beautiful things that are going on in the midst of all that craziness that I just mentioned. I could list some stuff for you this morning, even right now. There's a bunch of kids in Baltimore City that are being mentored by people just like us. And young girls that are being mentored by women in Baltimore City. They're having a breakfast right now. One kid called my son last night saying, Mr. Goody, is my guy coming tomorrow? Like, I want to make sure he's going to come because he missed last week. There's one kid crying out for somebody just to show up in his life. That's just one. We could go on. I talked to a guy last night. 120 kids at Delaney High School were crammed into somebody's house. Having a Young Life Club, letting somebody tell them about Jesus, many that don't know. I can tell you marriages that are getting restored. I can tell you about a couple that I married 12 years ago. They got divorced. They just got remarried this summer. I mean, I'm just telling you, like, it's not all, but it's kind of what Steve's saying, like this thing is moving. And let me read this to you. This is right before they go into the promised land. And God is telling the people, look, there's prosperity before you, but you have a part in this, whether you're going to taste it or not. It says now, this is Deuteronomy 30, verse 11. Now, what I'm commanding you today is not too difficult for you or beyond your reach. Isn't that beautiful? God's saying, look, I'm going to command you something that you're more than able to do. I'm not making the bar 8 feet, okay? You can do this. It is not up to heaven so that you have to ask who will ascend into heaven to get it and proclaim it to us so we may obey it. Nor it is beyond the sea so that you have to ask who will cross the sea to get it and bring it back to us so we can obey it. No, get this. The word is very near you. It is in your mouth and in your heart so you may obey it. See, I set before you today life and prosperity, death and destruction. Basically, you get to decide. For I command you today to love the Lord your God, to walk in His ways, to keep His commands, decrees, and the laws. Then you will live and increase, and the Lord your God will bless you in the land that you are entering to possess. Get this. But if your heart turns away and you are not obedient, and if you're drawn away to bow down to other gods and worship them, then I declare to you this day that you will certainly be destroyed. And I don't think God's threatening them that He's going to destroy them. They'll be destroyed by what they're doing. You will not live long in the land you are crossing the Jordan to enter and possess it. Like, here's the deal. Like, you have to be a certain kind of person to be in the promised land well. And I think people that endure certain things are more prepared in some ways. In fact, we saw that in Hebrews 11, that these who died in faith didn't receive all that was promised, for the world wasn't worthy of them yet. But what is to come? And we have a great cloud of witnesses that wait us. Then it ends with this. But this day I call heaven and earth, get this, heaven and earth as witness against you, that I have set before you life and death, blessing and curses. Now what? Choose what? Life. So that you and your children may live. and you may love the Lord your God, listen to His voice, and hold fast to Him. For the Lord is your life, and He will give you many years in the land He swore to give to your fathers, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. He's basically, you're part of a story. You can have a front row seat in this thing. Just love the right things in the right order. And when you go through the desert, hard times, whatever they are, it isn't just about you. It's about me. And if you dare to orient your life around me in those times, you will discover things about me in life that you won't any other way. And so we're going to pick this up again next week. Does this make sense? We're good? Good. All right. Whew. Amen. Another glorious fall day awaits us, I think.
Hey, Pat?
Yes.
Warren changed her numbers and leave up 4 tables.
4 tables.
And chairs.
4 tables and chairs. So guess what, Jerry? You, Watsy and the team, Rye and Ken and Steph, and you guys will leave those up. The rest will break down. Hey, let me make one other announcement. Could I do that? Let me make one other quick announcement, and then we'll do our verse, all right? I unabashedly ask this. If any of you know of someone, or maybe you, we've got some guys that we're working with that need beater-uppers, like cars that run, that you say, I got to get that out of here. I don't know what I want to do with that, but I want to get rid of that thing. As long as it doesn't need like $14,000 worth of work on it, if it runs and we can put a little money in it, we can do that. We got some guys that need to get to jobs, and they're not going to be able to do that without transportation. So if it's a little bit like a bumper car, that's all the better, because that's how they drive. And it's kind of like, as long as it's got wheels and runs and is safe, and we'll help make sure it is safe. We'll go put it through inspection and pay for all that. But if you have any knowledge of any of that, let me know. We'll take it off your hands. It's good to be together today. Amen? Amen. The Lord is good. Hey, let's do our verse, all right? Let's do this. Thank you, guys. Sorry, the rest of you have to take down the tables. It's your morning in the desert. Wham, wham, wham. Here we go. John 16:33. I have told you these things so that in me you may have peace. Amen to that.